Now things get a little bit difficult. This is what's gonna happen. This is what's gonna happen. Didn't happen. Totally didn't happen. So it is not a spoiler to say dark and messed up people doing dark and messed up things. Yep, you heard that right. One of 3 books, fingers. There's just, there's so much goodness to this. I'm trying to like break up the dark ones with lighter ones, but I'm gonna run out of light books, but. Hi everybody, it's Audrey and welcome back to Chapter and Converse and welcome to part 2 of my favorite books of 2022. So today we are gonna count down the final 11 and I feel like maybe there's some surprises, maybe there won't be some surprises, we'll see. If you missed part 1, I'll link it down below for you guys. That went up yesterday, but for the sake of time, I split it into 2 parts. For you guys, for me, just makes it easier for everybody. So without any further ado, let's get in to the rest of my list. Okay, I would like to say we're a bit in the home stretch here. I feel like it's the pile that never ends. So he's here, The House Across the Lake by Riley Sager. You guys knew he was gonna make a spot, right? You knew it, you knew it. I really, really enjoyed this book. I had the great fortune of getting an arc of this and I compulsively read it. I was completely invested and I was reading it when I was doing a vlog. And I know I had told you guys like Final Girls is still my top. And then I would say The House Across the Lake and Home Before Dark are right below it as favorites of mine. And I have a very hard time force ranking him, but this book has the kind of, it's Rear Window on a Lake. So we have our main character, Casey Fletcher, who I still am convinced it's JB Fletcher, but that's just me. Wishful thinking. And she is a Broadway actress. She is dealing with her husband's death. She is not dealing with it well. She is boozing up a storm. And her mom is basically like, you need to get out of Manhattan, go to the family lake house, like clean up your mess, get it together. And Casey's like, fine. She's a grown woman, but she's like, fine. But her mom is famous, her family is famous, and she's getting a lot of bad press for being a sloppy mess all around Manhattan. So Casey comes up to the lake house. It's the off season. So of course it is. And she's pretty messy when she's up there, but she winds up sitting on the porch with a glass of bourbon and some binoculars, and she's watching The House Across the Lake and the fabulous couple who lives there. And he is like a millionaire who created an app. And then Catherine is a former model, and Casey and Catherine wind up becoming friends, and then Catherine goes missing. And of course the husband did it. So we get a little bit Rear Window. I feel like there's a little Gone Girl vibe to it. There's a little Woman in the Window vibe to it. So it's sort of like this well-trodden trope of the missing wife accusing the husband, an unreliable narrator who likes to booze it up, but also has some delicious twists on it. And I said it when I was talking about it in my vlog. Riley Sager really surprised me and did something he's never done before, and I loved it. And again, theories and thoughts and feelings and what ifs. We get some dual timelines. We get a lot of just fun characters. And he described it as, I want to say like banana pants. It's totally banana pants. It's crazy. It's bingey. It's just great fun. I just feel like it's great fun. I love his writing. And I'm always a fan. I'm always a fan. And this one I had a great time with. So I'm excited to read it again because I need to obviously meaningfully mark up my copy because I was doing the e-arc. So love him so much. Okay, the next 2 books are books that I have already talked about. So super quickly, Shiver by Ali Reynolds. This is Her and Then There Were None. We are on the French Alps for a reunion between a group of snowboarders. 10 years ago, they trained together. They're all Olympic hopefuls. One of the people from their group disappeared 10 years ago, and now someone has lured them back to that mountain for some revenge. I love a revenge story. This is past and present timelines. There is a romantic element to this, which I did not expect, nor do I ever require in a thriller, and actually prefer my thrillers without a level of romance, but this one worked like in spades, and I was all invested and I wanted more of it. I loved the characters. I loved the dynamic. Ali Reynolds herself was a snowboarder. She infuses so much reality and authenticity to it and also puts us on a completely wild ride, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I was absolutely obsessed with this book. I read it in January. I still talk about it. I still recommend it to everyone. It's so, so good. Perfect version of And Then There Were None. As like a redo, loved it. And then Book Lovers by Emily Henry. Did I talk about this book before? Geez, I don't even know if I did. Well, if I did, here it is again. And if I didn't, here it is. This is my second Emily Henry book, and I loved this. I really, really did. I did a combination of reading an audiobook of this one, and I just thought it was so great. And it was funny, it was emotional, it was a little steamy, and I just love her writing. I love her characters. So in this one, our main character is Nora. She is a literary agent. She is cutthroat. And she winds up spending the month of August in this small town with her sister Lippy. So Lippy is her little sister. She is pregnant. This is like her last hurrah. So Lippy and Nora wind up spending a few weeks in Sunshine Falls. Lippy has organized the entire trip. And Sunshine Falls is like that perfect Hallmark town, picturesque, and was the inspiration for a book that Nora worked on. And Lippy is convinced that Nora needs her Hallmark movie moment because she has spent her entire life working. Their mom passed away when they were younger. Nora moved into mom mode and has taken care of Lippy, and Lippy wants Nora to kind of have some fun and take care of herself. And they go to this small town, which is filled with all of the small town Hallmark movie tropes, which I absolutely love how Emily Henry plays on them. But of course, Nora's nemesis, Charlie Lastra, shows up in the small town. They are rivals from New York City, and they have to kind of deal with each other in Sunshine Falls. And I loved it. It's smart, it's funny. I think I said that already. There is romance, there is family drama, there's a great sister story in this. I feel like it hits on all chords. And it's another book that made me cry. It's a book that made me laugh out loud. It's a book that made me like, woof, wave a fan. And I just loved it. I'm such a huge fan of Emily Henry's writing. And I just think she's like the queen of bingeable books. And I always love anything that involves writing or the publishing industry or anything like that. So sort of as an added layer. And Nora is dealing with one of her writers who is like such an over-the-top writer. And I just love that part too. So everything about this book was absolutely amazing. I honestly don't remember if I talked about it. Okay, now things get a little bit difficult. So these all definitely have darkness to them, but let's start with Razorblade Tears by S.A. Cosby. So this is a book that is not a for everyone book, and I feel like a few more books I'm going to talk about are not a for everyone book, but it is such an exceptional book. So this was actually gifted to me last year by Dawn. So thank you again, Dawn. This book was so, so good. And I'm so glad I read it. I did a combination of reading an audiobook of this one as well, which was really a theme this year, and they both are amazing. So in this one, we are following two fathers. So it's a black father, a white father, two dead sons, and a quest for revenge and redemption. So we have Ike and Buddy Lee. They are both ex-cons, and they are both out of jail now and living their current lives. And neither of them had a particularly good relationship with their sons. And the two of them have not met before, but when their sons are murdered, they are brought together to try and find out what happened. So it is first believed to be a hate crime against their sons, but the police case goes cold. They don't have any suspects, and Ike and Buddy Lee are not okay with that. They want justice for their sons, and they want some revenge. And this book is very heavy on the violence. And I was a little bit hesitant about it because, again, I don't do great with complete gore and violence. But I will say in this book, while shocking and hard to read and listen to at times, it serves the story. It's not there for shock value. It's not there for exploitation. It is gritty. It is dark. There is pain for these men confronting what happened to their sons, confronting their own realities of their relationships. There is so much, I feel like, pain and grief in this book. I cried when I read this book. I, again, had theories. They were wrong. I just was so invested in this. It is like Southern noir. He's such an amazing writer. And this is one of those books where he is a thriller writer writing about some very difficult topics and is using such beautiful language and turns of phrases and weaving together these sentences and creates such amazing visuals with his words. And I was so blown away by the language and the words and the prose of this book. And I was not expecting it. I was expecting like hardcore thriller. And there's definitely fast-paced, page-turning, thrillery moments to this, but it's such an elevated level of, I feel like it's strange to say, but such a beauty to this book at the same time. And I just really, really loved it. So of course I tabbed up some of the pages, and some of the lines I highlighted are giveaways for things, but this one line from early in the book, it says, "Tears for who they were and what they all had lost. Each drop felt like it was slicing his face open like a razor blade." And I just was like, ugh, this man is gifted. So amazing storytelling, beautiful writing, and like the unlikely pair coming together over the loss of their sons. And I just absolutely loved it. So again, warning on the darkness, warning on the violence of this one, but if it sounds like it's up your alley, absolutely read it. I am excited. I have Blacktop Wasteland, and then his original book was just re-released, My Darkest Prayer, which I'm excited to get my hands on as well. So he is definitely a writer that I was late to the party with, and I need to make up for lost time. And of course I realize I have another book that I already talked about, but still, Flicker in the Dark by Stacey Willingham. Outstanding debut. I absolutely loved this book as well, was obsessed with it when I read it. And it's just, we've got past and present mysteries. We have a serial killer vibe to it. So our main character is Chloe, and when she was younger, she was 12, 6 teenage girls went missing in her small Louisiana town. And by the end of the summer, her father had confessed to the crimes and went to jail for them. So obviously Chloe has some baggage. She's had some stuff to deal with. Life has not been easy, but she has reestablished herself. She has her own practice. She is a psychologist. And in the present day, she is planning her wedding. You know, she has a successful practice, and then girls start to go missing again. And it feels extremely reminiscent to what was going on when she was 12. And it, of course, forces her to question everything she thought that she knew. And there were so many great characters in this. Again, I had theories. I had theories. Some of my suspicions were right. Some of them were dead wrong. And I just really enjoyed her writing. I enjoyed her characters. Hugely bingeable. Set in Louisiana. Very atmospheric. I have never been there before, but you could feel it. Like, this is one of those books you could feel it. You could smell it. Like the stickiness and the heat and the summer. And I really enjoyed it. I loved the twists and turns in this book, and I just think she is like such a gem of a writer and such a talent. Loved it. Another one of my most favorite people, Jennifer Hillier and Things We Do in the Dark. So thank you again to Minotaur for like the 19th time for gifting me this ARC. This is the one that has the glow-in-the-dark cover on it, and I screamed when I got this book. I was so thirsty for this. And when they sent me the ARC and sent me the email that they were going to send me the ARC, which I basically begged them for, I swear like my entire year was made. And Jennifer Hillier, you guys know, she is my dark and messed up person doing dark and messed up things, and I love everything she writes. This is another book where you have multiple POVs. We have mysteries in the past and mysteries in the present. So when this book opens, our main character, Paris, is getting arrested for her husband's murder. So he is dead in their bathtub, covered in blood, and she is standing over him, also with a whole bunch of blood and holding a straight razor. And while Paris obviously is not super jazzed about getting arrested, she's more concerned about the level of publicity that is going to come with this crime, because her husband is a former famous comedian. There's a big age gap between the two of them. And he'd been living a quiet life, but sort of was back on the scene, a very prominent person. And she knows there's going to be a lot of fanfare and attention to this crime, and she's worried that her entire life is going to be exposed as a result of it. And she's more worried about that than being accused of his murder. So we wind up following a true crime podcaster who does a true crime podcast called Things We Do in the Dark. And we start to watch some investigation, and we meet some really interesting characters, and we try and figure out what happened to her husband, and we try and figure out what Paris is so afraid of. And again, I just really enjoyed it. I think Jennifer Hillier beautifully explores messiness and mistakes and consequences and people doing what they need to do to survive, and just dark families. Dark. It's in the title. I just loved it so much, though. I just think she's such a star, and I really enjoy her writing. And this is definitely one of her darker books. I mean, they're all dark, but I definitely did not see some stuff coming. I definitely was surprised by some of the turns in this book, and I also very much enjoyed it. So that probably comes as no surprise to anyone that I really, really enjoyed this book. But huge fan, just love everything she does, and was so excited to get this and read this. And I just love secrets and lies and hiding, and just like, oh, I just love it so much. I just love it so much. The next book I want to talk about is The Club by Ellery Lloyd. So first I need to fix myself because this is actually the fourth book with an And Then There Were None Agatha Christie vibe to it. I can't get anything right today. So this one is another rich people behaving badly. We have an isolated island, and I was obsessed with this book. So The Club is this very exclusive celebrity club. They open up places all around the world, and for a fee, you get all the exclusivity, all the privacy. It's the place they can go to not be bothered by the press, to just be able to be their true selves. And this club, it's opening weekend. It is kind of like in Daisy Darker. When the tide comes in, there is no way in or off the island. That's right, in or off the island. And we know on the first page that somebody is dead. And then we wind up going back and forth in time. So what I love about this book is we do get these like super uber rich celebrities. We have the owners of the club, and then we have the staff who operates the club. So housekeeping, event planning, the chefs, like all the behind the scene people. And it's a little bit of like an upstairs downstairs vibe to it. So I love seeing the celebrities like who are so ridiculous and over the top and like oozing with money, but to see them through each other's eyes and then to see them through the service staff's eyes. And I just felt like such a level of reality to it. As someone who has worked in operations and worked behind the scenes and worked with, you know, 4-star hotels and high-end residences, and people are just awful sometimes. But I just loved it. I thought it was really smart. It was super compulsive of a read. And again, I love that rich people behaving badly dynamic. I love the And Then There Were None trope to it. And I was just, again, it was another book where, like I said, I'm always expecting the next book to be the best book. But this one I also just was blown away by. I didn't expect to love it as much as I did. And it was great. Like, it was just, it was such great fun. I need to read more by them. And then we have one of my new favorite authors of 2022, because I finally read my Hannah Morrissey. So I read Hello Transcriber, which I talked about in a different video, and I'm going to talk about The Widowmaker now, which is definitely one of my faves of the year. So I just read this in the last couple of weeks, and again, I just love her writing. Dark, atmospheric, gritty, cold as all get out. This book is set over Christmas in Wisconsin. When I tell you, you can feel the chill, you can hear the snow crackling under your feet, you can hear the ice. This book is so well done. I love her dark characters. So this is a book series where the town of Black Harbor is the anchor character. So Hello Transcriber, we had a police transcriber and a detective who partnered together to solve a crime in their town. In this one, we have two different main characters. You do have a little bit of crossover with characters, so you don't need to read them in order, but if you did, whichever one you read first, you will see the characters that play in both of the both of the stories. But in this one, we are following a photographer named Morgan. And at the beginning of the book, she is hired to cover this Christmas party for the super rich Reynolds family who live in this town. And Morgan has just moved back to Black Harbor from Chicago. Things kind of fell apart there, so she had to return home. So reluctant return home, which I love. She is doing a photography session for the Reynolds family, who 20 years ago, the patriarch, I've done this every video, the patriarch of their family, Clive Reynolds, disappeared. The case was never solved, despite the fact that his wife was kind of looked at as a top suspect because she got a lot of money from the insurance, but they never found him, never found out what happened. And then we have a detective, Ryan Hudson, who again, Nancy Drew vibes, and his partner has been murdered. He is dealing with the complications of that. And something that happens in the present day provides a clue to what possibly happened to Clive Reynolds in the past. And Ryan winds up working on that case. So worlds collide, things happen. And I really enjoyed this book. I really thought Ryan was a great character. I enjoyed Morgan a lot. Hannah Morrissey was doing an interview where she said, like, the first version of this book that she sent to her editor, they said it was like too dark and too weird. That's like a loose quote. And it's definitely dark. There's definitely some weird stuff that goes down in this. She wound up changing a couple of things, but I really enjoyed the dynamics between the characters. And again, it's like she reminds me of Jennifer Hillier and she reminds me of Tana French. There is darkness, there is pain, there is messiness, there is consequences, there's mystery, so past and present mysteries. This book, again, Ryan is really dealing with the loss of his partner who was murdered, And there is so much about grief and pain and loss that I thought was just so beautifully done. Hannah Morrissey herself used to be a police transcriber. Her husband is a police lieutenant, I want to say. So there's so much authenticity to the police side of this. And I think the conversations around the murdered police officer are really impactful. I cried when I read this book. Like, I did not expect to be so emotionally moved by this story, on top of being completely entertained, completely invested in the investigation. And then Morgan is our sort of amateur detective door into things as well. So again, I think Hannah Morrissey accomplishes so much in 300 pages of book. And I'm just such a huge, massive fan of hers. So highly recommend you check her out. This book is perfect for this time of year, at least if you're in the colder areas, the colder climates. So maybe a late holiday book gift to yourself. And I think you can't go wrong with this book. It's like the dark Christmas book that I knew I needed and I finally got. The next book is a book that I never saw coming as being a favorite, but it had all the things I love in a book, and it really, really blew me away. And this is The Reunion by Guillermo Musso. So this book involves three best friends who 25 years ago, when they were seniors at this elite prep school, their fourth friend ran off with their philosophy teacher who she was having an affair with, and no one ever saw or heard from her again. And then in the present day, they all get an invitation for a class reunion, and they have not spoken to each other since graduation. They all went on and lived their separate lives, but they all know that they need to come back. And here's why. Because as part of this reunion, they also get a notice detailing a plan for a new gymnasium. School is doing some renovations, and they know they all need to go back because there's a body buried in the gym's walls, and they're the ones who put it there. So this book takes place on the French Riviera. This was translated to English, and I was the boob who didn't know how snowy and icy you could get in the French Riviera. But this is another book that is like absolutely perfect for this time of year. It's cold, it's atmospheric. Again, past and present mysteries. I tabbed this book so much. I was obsessed. I was obsessed with this friend group. I was obsessed with what was going on in the gym. What did they do? What happened? The writing was so great. There were so many wonderful turns of phrases. There is a map, which you guys know I like die for a map. And I just did not know where this book was going at all. And I just, I loved it. That's why we're here. I loved it so much. I did not see this book coming in the slightest, and I was obsessed. I mean, I just compulsively read it. There's so many just great lines and words, and some of it's about the writing life. Some of it is just great descriptions that he did, great atmosphere that he did. I was here for the 90s nostalgia of it all. Like, I just loved it so much. So I do have 2 more books by him, which I definitely need to get cracking on. But this was just such an epic surprise, and I loved it. I just absolutely thought it was so good. I love these dark and messed up friend groups, and I love people who do like horrible stuff in the past and then it comes back to bite them in the present. It's just so good. It's just one of my favorites. It's one of my favorites. It's why I love The Pact. It's why I love these dynamics between the friends and anything set at a prep school. And I just, so good. Okay, my final 2, you guys, and I'm not saying one is better than the other because I actually struggled because I loved these books both so much, but they are completely different books. So let's start with The Likeness by Tana French. This is the 2nd book in the Dublin Murder Squad series, and I reread In the Woods this year, which I just like remembered how amazing it was, but forgot how amazing it was. And as soon as I finished it, I knew I wanted to jump into the 2nd book. And in this book, we are following Cassie Maddox. So Cassie was one of the 2 detectives of In the Woods. She plays a very integral part in the 1st book, but this is her book where she is really shining in the lead spot, if that makes any sense. The way Tana French writes these books is each book involves a different detective in the murder squad as our lead character, but the other detectives sort of in the squad play bit parts, and they're like, everyone appears everywhere, but this is her turn in the spotlight, for lack of a better term. So when this book opens, it is 6 months after In the Woods, and Cassie is called to a crime scene because the body of the victim not only looks exactly like Cassie, but she is carrying an ID of Alexandra Madison, which is an alias that Cassie used when she worked in undercover. and nobody knows who this woman is or how she got Cassie's former undercover information. So Cassie winds up being pulled into that case. So this book has a bit of a dark academia spin to it. Alexandra Madison, yep, that's her name, was a university student, and they need to investigate and find out what happened. So I advise going into this one on the darker side. And well, I very much think you can read this without reading In the Woods if you're not interested in the Woods. I definitely know that I got more out of it having read it, because Cassie was one of my favorite parts of In the Woods. And to see how she is 6 months later after that book, I found very interesting. And also there are a few very small nuggets where I think if you read In the Woods, they have big impact, but if you didn't, it's negligible. And you don't know what you don't know. So it's not critical in a plot point here, but I feel like it's just a critical moment for Cassie as a character, if that makes sense. So I am going to continue to read the series in order, but I just thought Cassie was so amazing. And what I love about Tana French's books is, again, very much like S.A. Cosby, her writing is lyrical and beautiful and smart, and it's a mix of, not like S.A. Cosby, but kind of like Daniel Cole. It is a mix of police procedural, but there is also some dark humor to this. There is obviously some weightier subject matter because we're dealing with murder and investigations. This is not particularly gory in any sense, but is also definitely disturbing in some senses. But I really enjoyed the characters in this, and Cassie's undercover, he used to be her, I guess her boss, Frank, who I believe has a starring role in one of the future books. I really enjoyed him in this book, and I really enjoyed their dynamic together. So just such a huge fan. I will say I wound up watching the Dublin Murder Squad TV series afterwards, and that is based on In the Woods and the Likeness. They made so many changes, which I don't think served the story. So if you have seen that and either enjoyed it or were ho-hum on it, I would go back and read the books because they're so much better. I hate to say that. I feel like they did a pretty good job with the In the Woods portion, but what is impactful about this story to me is it takes place afterwards. And part of the issue I had with the TV adaptation is because they ran the cases simultaneously, Cassie played a smaller part in the In the Woods part of the TV show, where she's an integral part of the book. But this is her chance to, like I say, be in the spotlight. And I just think she's such a dynamic, amazing character. She's complex. She's really interesting. She has her own struggles. She has her own stuff. And I just think she's just a dynamite character. And I would love to read more with Cassie in it. So hopefully that'll happen someday. We'll see. But I really, really loved her as a character. And then finally, my number one book of the year, which I also think will surprise nobody, is The Last Housewife by Ashley Winstead. What a weird reveal I just did there for you guys. It's tabbed to the high heavens. I compulsively read this book. I buddy read this with Sarah from Sarah's Nightstand. I was so glad I buddy read it because man, did we have a lot to talk about. And much like Razorblade Tears, this is not a for everybody book, but if you are interested in this book, I highly recommend it. There are trigger warnings at the front of the book, which I recommend that you check out in case you're concerned about any triggers that are in it. This is definitely one of the darkest books I have read, and I really am just consistently wowed by Ashley Winstead as an author, because you guys know I loved In My Dreams, which is like college reunion, past present mysteries, co-ed group of friends, messed up. Fool Me Once, which was just absolutely amazing romance, and then for her to go to this dark place, she is such a phenom to me. I'm so intrigued and obsessed with her writing. And this book is a book I think you're best served going into it blind, but definitely check out trigger warnings in case you have concerns about it. But we are following our main character, Shay, who is living in Texas when the book opens, and she is listening to her favorite true crime podcast, which one of her friends from high school is now running, leading, creating. So Shay's husband is out of town. She is literally hanging out by the pool, painting her toenails, listening to the true crime podcast. And that is how she finds out that one of her best friends from college was found dead at that school back in New York. And Shay knows that Laurel's death is connected to something that they did when they were in college. And she recruits her friend, who is doing the true crime podcast, who she hasn't talked to in years. And she goes back to the one place she swore she would never go back to, which is the college in New York. And she is going to find out what happened. So this book is very dark. It goes to some extremely dark places. So it is not a spoiler to say that Shay and her friends met this very enthralling man when they were in college, and they wound up becoming a part of a sex cult. And as Shay has decided she needs to go back and find out what happened to Laurel, she is drawn back into this very dark world, and she becomes obsessed with finding out what happens and is willing to sort of do whatever it takes to get to the bottom of what happened. And this is one of those books where I also feel like the terror that exists in this book is a lot of research that Ashley Winstead did is based on things that have really happened. And it is one of those books where I feel like you read elements of this and it feels like this could be going on anywhere. These people could exist anywhere. I was so disturbed on so many levels about how real so much of this felt and how real so much of this is. And I really enjoyed Shay. I really love how Ashley Winstead used the podcast in this book. I thought it was really smart. I thought these characters were just absolutely amazing. And anything this woman writes, I will be reading it compulsively. And I just was like, oh. And it was one of those books that was like disturbing and dark and uncomfortable, but I just wanted to know what was going to happen next. I read it in a handful of days. There's a great conversation with Ashley Winstead at the back of the book, which I highly recommend reading afterwards. And she has done both spoiler-free and spoiler-full interviews and podcasts, which I also felt were really interesting to listen to. But to hear her passion behind her writing and her passion behind her storytelling also, to me, just elevates it all to another level. But yeah, this book was epic, was absolutely epic. Like, I can't wait to reread it. I just absolutely can't wait to reread it. I just love her so much. So on that happy high note, that's going to do it for everything I read, or not everything I read, but everything I loved in 2022. So you guys, just what an absolutely spectacular year. I can't even believe that it's over. Not from a reading perspective, but from other perspectives, I'm a little bit glad that it's over. But I had an amazing reading year, and this was definitely one of those years where, like I said, I read more books than I ever have. And I really feel like my reading saved me this year. It was such an escape for me. It was sometimes a procrastination tool for me. If you saw my year-end video writing, I just fell in love with so many books, and I discovered so many amazing new authors, and I just fell more in love with other authors that I have read before. And I just will never stop being excited about books. So there you have it. Let me know if any of your favorites are on my list. Let me know what one of your favorites of the year is, or 5 of your favorites. Let me know whatever you want to let me know. And I will see you guys in another video really soon. So thank you for being on the journey with me. Thanks for being here today. And I love you guys so much. And I will see you in another video. Bye, everybody.